interesting is the word interdependencies, how you can create synergies with people. And I think based into the word that we know, I'm not going to say it's a harder world. I think it's a more complex world. And more complexity means that you need to rely on more people to understand the full pictures.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Hey,
Hi,
hey, how are you?
Hi, good, good. So this is Martha with Universal Power Tarot, and we've got Marie-Amélie today as a friend with her business Spark It, and I'm super excited to talk to you about leadership today and what it actually means, like to be a leader, or what the definition of a leader is for us personally. And the way this works is we're not going to do a real interview style, just so our viewers and listeners are aware, but we're just going to do a conversation like we're used to, because what we've noticed, because Marie-Amélie has been on the Fellow Seekers for quite a while, of course that was paused, but then we got into private conversations as well, and we both noticed that there was great benefit in those conversations and great takeaways, and hence we thought we want to bring you a little snippet of those kind of conversations today, and we hope you enjoy it. Let us know down in the comments. And I'm now going to introduce my lovely friend Marie-Amélie with her business Spark It. She says about herself and about her business that she's a hands-on contributor. This is really important to her to stress that. And I'm going to give it over to you, and so you can explain a bit about yourself and about your business.
Super. Thank you very much, Martha. I appreciate that. I'm already smiling because, of course, the conversation has already started, as usual.
I know.
So what I mean with hands-on contributor is that for people who are working by themselves or in very small structures, they don't always have the benefit of working as a team and be able to call someone easily and find information they need, especially if they want to grow and to start to develop something. They are not always aware of the sector, of the topic, of the codes. And I'm like, why don't we help each other with that information? And that's what I'm bringing with my expertise, life expertise and work expertise. I'm coming and listening to the people, and while they're explaining me what's going on with their business or their project, I'm like, okay, I already have a couple of ideas. Let's sit together, see what we can work together on, what would make sense for you based on your knowledge, my know-how, and let's put resources together, because two minds works better than one. So that's really the type of service that I'm offering. It's really,
Yes.
I'm coming, I'm explaining, like, okay, no, I'm more like, can you explain me what's going on? I'm listening into it, and based on that, I can see options that could be taken, and that's
Right.
really cool. And no need to explain more. I think people can check on the website, or based on the discussion we are going to have today, I
Yeah.
think they're going to have a sense of how it works.
Okay, perfect.
So that's cool. And maybe from a personal note, I'm based in Belgium. I'm French speaking. I'm 37 and I love horse riding. That's actually my first meeting on Monday. I always start with horse riding before my week.
Really? That's so awesome. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And if I
So
can just say so personally, like, because I've watched your growth within the last 2 years, because we've been in contact on and off, and that was quite magnificent to watch, because you do come from a very strict business background. And if I can let people in on this was very much like the masculine perspective that you were coming from, and now going so much more into flow state and into the feminine perspective. And hence, I really support what you're doing, and the hands-on contribution, as you were saying, that you don't just give people stuff in their hands, but you're actually there with them personally to support them, at least for the first time. So, because this is what I feel a lot of people can be afraid of, the kind of first step to step into something, and they need that kind of support, and then you're there to catch them, to be there for them until they can do it themselves.
yeah, and sometimes it's also recognizing that's the issue you have. I don't know how to answer to it, but do you have someone in your network, or do you know someone who can do that type of work? And that sometimes is already super helpful for people. is be able to connect the right people together. And that's also one of the things I like to do.
Oh, sweet. Awesome. Okay. So I would say let's hop straight into leadership and leader. And I think we both have something to say about this. I would like for you to start, if that's cool with you. Like, what's
Yeah.
your definition on leadership or on a person that leads?
It's a very good question because, as you mentioned, I'm coming from a strict business background, and meaning coming from the big corporate world, you have the tendency to associate leader as being people manager of a team, and it's great. But I've come to realize that being a leader is so much more than that. You can be leader on so many aspects. I think for me, it's two principles. It's being a leader, you will inspire people by building trust and willingness to follow you, to go with you, to do something or to act upon something, or to inspire others. And for me, that's the two aspects of leadership which are really pregnant for the moment. And I had to smile because before that conversation, I was like, because we both agreed that we wanted to discuss about that. I was like, okay, let's check what is the definition of leadership and what is the origin of the word. And actually, the origin is really go first as a guide to show the way. And that's one of the definition which I really resonated with me. Also through things I went personally and the experience that I went through, and I think you had the same experience, that we went through things that pretty much no one in our circle or friends and family went through, or in a different way. And now I start to realize I was kind of alone in that process. But now I have more and more people asking me about those things that happened to me. How did I dealt with that? How what did I put in place? And that's super interesting. So that's one. And the other one, which are really, really funny, apparently the origin of the word, so the etymology, I think it's the correct word as well in English, it's, I think, somehow linked to travel. So it's really interesting that the common origin of lead is travel, but I'm no expert. So, I mean, if someone who is looking at that conversation has more info on that, happy to share, to hear about it. But it was quite interesting to look at that. So I was like, okay, interesting, because I love traveling.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's take whatever you can take with you so you can enjoy it.
Yeah. Totally. This is so interesting. Oh man. Yeah, totally. Because paving the way for someone else, as you were saying, or just like going through the process. So, and I think there's different sets too. Some people go through that with the help of others who are, of course, leaders themselves. But then there are others that seem to go by themselves, like at least for some time. And this is, of course, meant to make you super strong and super independent. And so that you can actually find your personal way without being influenced by anyone else, because only you can bring that. Only you do have that type of potential within yourself to be that specific type of leader. Because if you then were influenced by someone else, it is then a lot of their stuff too. And it may take you years to get rid of that conditioning and to develop your own self. Again, there's no good or bad. It's just like two different types of ways. And I very much think that we have those agreements before we come here to say, I'm totally able to do this. I'm strong enough to go through the whole process and come out on the other end, and then be able to help others like on that path as well. And then, like you said, come together in understanding with other people that resonate with you, that have kind of like done the same.
Yeah, and what you just explained about some people do it together with other people, and it makes me think about the peer review or the peer system, that you have peers that you can relate to. And I think that's also something, at least for me personally, which I realized that I'm much more a connector as a leader. For me, one of my strengths is being a connector. And it's also recognizing that being a leader is not always going up her in the corporate ladder or have a bigger business, but it's also recognizing your talents and be able to go public with your talent, or in the sense that you know about them, so you really embrace them. And for me, that's how I realize I'm good at connecting people. I opening doors for people from different world and put them around the table and have the discussion, or at least demystify sometimes certain worlds. And I think that's where it's also interesting to see leader in or you can be a mentor also as a leader. So there are different words you can kind of mismatch, or not mismatch, but exchange. And I think that's the beauty of it, is whatever you think is meaning as leader for you, that's okay. That's totally true. And I just realized for me that's being the connectors, that's sharing experiences. I'm a team player. So that's how I'm a leader, is I'm a team player.
Okay. Ah, that's so interesting. See, there you go. Because I wouldn't like the first thought in my head wouldn't necessarily be to be a leader is a team player, but you know the old principle of it. When I think leader, I think automatically male, high in the hierarchy and then down, like the pyramid kind of a thing. But the way you're describing is kind of like this plateau. Of course, someone like a lesser hierarchy, if any, and just someone like with a lot of integrity that has people skills. So again, a lot more feminine influence that is coming in here than what we may have grown up as. And by the way, I'm 39, currently turning 40 very soon, and so we're kind of in the same age range here, because you said you're 37. And just like to kind of know like the how do you say, the era we grew up in was very much male dominated, and very much, at least for me, because I grew up in Germany, was very authoritarian too, and I did not do well with that at all. So it's just like if anything, I'm opposed to leadership, especially if it doesn't make any sense. Like that's like one of the things when I see that someone actually knows what they're doing. So the knowledgeable part of it really has to be there for me. And also I'm not doing it from ego. I'm not, whipping or whatever it is, right? I'm not driving other people forward just for my own good, but for the good of the whole collective. When I see this, I can totally respect it. I'm totally down. When I see the ego stuff, I'm like so out of there. Of course, that's my own conditioning as well, right? But I'm just like, okay, I'm good. Thank you.
No, but that's super interesting what you're saying, because there are two elements which popped up for me as follow-up. Is when you say it's like the way you explain it, Marie, it's like more linear, and it's more people all together making the best of who they are as unique as individuals, but also for the group. I think there is a word which is becoming more and more popular, and I think it's very interesting, is the word interdependencies, how you can create synergies with people. And I think based into the word that we know, I'm not going to say it's a harder world. I think it's a more complex world. And more complexity means that you need to rely on more people to understand the full pictures.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
And that's where it's, I love being a team player, because, and I'm daring to contact people I don't always know well, but I know that they have an expertise or something which is interesting for me, or potentially interesting for me. I'm like daring to call them and say, okay, hi, we have met maybe once. I would love to go for coffee and know more about you and what you do, because actually it resonates with me. And most of the time I'm just saying, it's really just for the sake of the discussion, and we share. And that's when we realize we have a lot of things which are linked together. So that's one thing. I don't know if you already want to react on that.
No, keep on. Sorry. And just for the people to explain, you know this, of course, but I write down certain things that are really striking to me. Of course, I can rewatch the video later, but this is kind of like, hey, you too. So that's good. So just so people are aware, if I'm not interested, I'm just like, I'm very interested.
Yeah, it's because we have learned that instead of trying to jump in right away in the discussion, we let the other go until the end. But it's interesting. So I will just finish with my second element. When you were talking about, for you, the competition that you had, the leader, kind of the boss image from the 80s, 90s. And I agree, we grew up in those years. So that was the societal world of our age. And I think it's also very important to explain that to people. So for maybe younger people who are watching this, is that something I think you and I have learned, is that it's really difficult, and we should not say that we are doing better than other generations, because we always are influenced by what is going on in the era you are growing up. And I think that's a message I also want to say to younger people or older people, is that it's fine that everybody has a different way of seeing leadership or how the things should be managed, because it's just a reflect of the world when you were born and then you have grew up in that world. So I wanted to add that. But going back to the first point I wanted to make is, so with the boss and the pyramid situation, for me, I think you mentioned authority. How is it valid for you? I think it's also linked to your core values. And I think that's how I'm kind of similar than you are, in that sense that it needs to make sense for me. I need to understand that the person in front of me is knowledgeable, or at least she is able to say, I don't know, but it's okay, I know someone who knows, or we will figure it out together.
Exactly.
So, but for me, it's linked to values. For some people, it will be other drivers which gonna make them see someone as being a leader. And I think it's also good to recognize that there is, and it's going back to the first point of the discussion, is there is no one type of leaders. There are multiple type of leaders. I think where the corporate world and the business world in general, and let's say, business as usual, have difficulties to really make that realize, is that it's not because you're not working that you are not a leader. It's not because you don't have your own company that you're not a leader. Like, that's also super valuable. Why don't we recognize that, or at least put the appropriate recognition on it?
Yeah.
So that was my view on that, Smart. I've been a bit carried away as usual as
No,
well.
That's all good. You know, it's all part of it. I wrote down a couple of things. So, what do you mean, just to your very recent thing, and in what way do you wish it would be recognized more in our society?
I think a lot of things it's changing, but I think at least for our generation, I think there are still a lot of things where we see money as the key drivers, as recognition or social recognition, like the job status.
Right.
And actually, you are not just that as a person. That would be super sad if you were just your bank account. You are your personality, you are your life experience, you are the people you are surrounded with, you are what you have learned, what you have read, what you have listened to. And I think that's where I'm sometimes missing the fact that if you don't have a very defined societal role, then the recognition is more difficult to get.
Okay.
Maybe I can explain. I mean, I don't know if I need to explain it in another way, or if it's clear like that.
To me, it's clear, but if you feel like you want to give more explanation to this, say so. But it's really good that you made that distinction too, I feel, because it is really important, especially for yourself, because if you don't recognize it within yourself, obviously, then no one else, or not no one else, but other people have a hard time recognizing that too. And I think if more and more people become aware that the social status or leadership isn't about money necessarily, of course it can be, and that's obviously also part of it, or can be part of it. I think the awareness needs to be brought about a bit more, that's not all it is.
No, and I think, the world is changing and things are changing. I can really see discussion from big corporates and also smaller companies. I had a talk yesterday with someone who just created a local startup here in Belgium and very popular. And all they have for them, they really recognize we cannot just offer money. That incentives doesn't make sense anymore. Even more with the younger generation for whom, and I can give the example in Belgium. It's very popular to have company car. It's a basic kind of part of salary thing. It's really popular. What I hear from the younger generation, and I can see it with myself, especially with the price of the oil price and everything, people, they don't want to own a car anymore. They just want to be able to rent it when they need it. So where for us, property was super important, and it still is important to a certain extent. Don't get me wrong. But you can see that for others, that shift of if property is more a burden than an advantage. So it's also interesting to see that difference.
Very interesting. Yeah. Here we go. Good. So obviously, as you can see, I had to change places, but we'll continue from here. My battery was just dying. I wasn't aware. Apologies. And what I was writing down actually earlier was the interdependency that I would like to touch a bit more on, and that you said like the world is more complex. Hence, we need everyone's potential. Do you want to touch on that a bit more?
Yeah, I think, and we kind of all know that we are stronger together, that by working together, in synergies, you get more resource, you get also more potential. And I think that's where sometimes, and I'm taking it from the perspective of being self-employed or working on your project on your own, is that if you always have known that, you have made it your way to make it work, and it's great. But I think I would like people to realize that it's also really cool and really fun to connect and really build, I don't say a network because it's still something different, but I would say you just find your people around you, your what I call your people team, where you call them when you have an issue, and it's totally fine to call them so you can develop. That's one thing. And the other aspect is, I used to work in corporation. I'm now self-employed, so I really know what was the benefit of having a team around me. And I'm like, why as being self-employed, I should impose myself on being by myself and alone all day, and not just being able to call someone and ask. That's the question. And actually, that's the principle that I'm putting in place. I have a question for one of a project I'm working on, and I'm literally asking one of my neighbors who is expert in that topic, can you come over for coffee on Friday so we can have that discussion?
Yeah.
And he's also self-employed, so he knows what it means. And I said, as incentive, you're gonna get a pie. That's what you get. But and it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be monetary. But I think just realizing that other people are a strength and not a threat to your project, it's so powerful.
Absolutely. I can totally agree on that one because, yeah, especially when you're self employed, I feel, but also in the corporate world, there's a lot of like maybe a lot of headbutting or jealousy and stuff going on. But to really step out of that zone, like you're saying, and to really step into let's help each other out and like where can we support each other, I think that'll be like a tremendous push if we could see that more and more. And I also believe that leaders could incent that, like if they embodied that, um it'll be something else. It'll really be something else.
Yeah, and I think for you and I, we have the same principle, and I really took that phrase from one of my manager and from the company I was working with. It's walk the talk. It's honestly, it's okay you don't know everything. It's okay you are really bad at certain things, as long as if you say something, you do it, and if you do something, you also say it in both ways, so that people really understand, okay, you're aligned, that's true to you are true to yourself, so I can believe you and I can trust you if you tell me something. And that's the basis also to make things happening.
For sure. And one thing that you said is exactly, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. If anything, that creates within myself more respect for the person. Because if we're talking about doctors, right, for example, you know how they've been in the hierarchy, like really high and authoritative figures, leaders, if you will, but more to me like an authoritative figure. And they're supposed to know everything, and they're supposed to be like godlike. And often I think that gets them and the patients in trouble because first of all, the way the school is taught, and I know this like from my sister, because my sister's a doctor, and I've been able to witness the process. They have to be like very this. It's not, oh, this may be something else. It's still very much, at least in Germany, in this very authoritarian kind of a process. You just have to learn it. There's no room, or very little room, for exploring and for, or to even say, I don't know this, because this is the other thing. Often doctors get into that. They're kind of perfectionists, and they also have to be. But there's this other element of where I wished there a lot of times that there is less ego, or would be less ego, and a lot more compassion and understanding for the patient. And I do get that they have very little time for each patient, and less so every year. But there's this element of myself where I'm like, I wish some of them like would be like, I don't know, or let me refer you to a colleague that knows, because I've personally had that happen to me like a lot of times, where it was just thrown at me as kind of like, okay, then you have to live with this and that. And I'm just like, well, you know what? There are other alternatives out there, and there's so much to explore. Like, and this is just an example, right, for other fields too, where we could just be, if we would be open-minded and stepped outside the box, I think we could achieve great things and collaborate with other areas even, and be willing and able to share what each one knows. And there's actually, talking about interdependency, because we were touching on it, I was actually watching, I think it was a series, I can't remember where it was, but where this woman put selected candidates that had illnesses, sicknesses that could not be explained by anyone. And she just put it out there in the internet, like to her colleagues, and not just the colleagues, but just like the greater world. Because if you as a person just went through similar symptoms, then first of all, you could relate. Second of all, you may have had solutions already that the other one may not have had. And this was absolutely great, because then they all came up with something amazing. So there was no leadership or a structure, like a hierarchy in place at all. It was just like everyone was given their opinions, and they kind of sorted through those opinions. It didn't matter if you were a doctor, if you were a person that was sick with the same thing. It was just like, okay, let's just, bring all of our input together, and the results were amazing.
Yeah, which really makes me, when you were talking about it, it was like, just makes me reinforce the power. Use your voice.
Yes.
Like, dare to ask, use your voice. And I realize how it sounds easy for me to say. I think for you, just having that conversation, I know for you, you realize for me how it is already such a big step for me to use my voice in that way. Yeah. But I also want to say to people, but also to others, is like, by saying, I don't know, or I wish I would know that, it gives the opportunity for other people to hear it and maybe realize that they have a piece of information which might be relevant for you. And it doesn't mean that they will tell you what to do and how to do it. They might say, oh, but actually someone told me about that book lately. I think that's kind of talk about the same topic you just mentioned. And you can build on those things to create a network of resources, not only people resources, but resources which are useful to you. And I think that's super interesting. And it's more like how you start to manifest things or synchronicities. But I think what you just said, the voice, if you stay silent, nothing can happen. I mean, nothing can happen in a way.
Yeah, no, it's very, I think it's very important, and also for people to think of themselves as, self-responsibility, and, to act on, because this is part of the voice, to act on what you feel inclined to share, to do, and not to hold yourself back. I think this is very much leadership, and not to build or to step on a pedestal that was built. For example, let's say with the doctor's example, and again, this is not just an example and only my own perception, because I grew up in Germany. That's kind of very authoritarian, I believe, especially, during when I grew up, and of course before that too, and because of the war and everything. And what was I going to say? The pedestal, exactly. So, for example, in the medical field, you learn certain things, and then you're made believe that this is all, like, and you're the bringer of this knowledge to your patient, or you're the authority that says, this is what you have, this is what you need to do, instead of, being like including the patient a bit more, for example, with the self-responsibility. Because I often also experience doctors prescribing something, and then you check it and they didn't even warn you about like the effects of the medication, for example, or they gave you something that wasn't appropriate or that wasn't for children, but they still gave it to you. So it's very much your own responsibility also, and realizing that they're humans too. And just because they were put like by whatever association on this kind of a pedestal and by society, that they're not above you. Like their knowledge, of course they're experts in their field, right? But also, for example, and I'm an expert in my field, in tarot and oracle cards, let's say, right? We are experts in different fields. That doesn't mean like that I won't listen to someone that has an input. And I think neither should doctors, because it's only, you've studied a lot and you obviously know a lot, but still be open to whatever wants to come in.
And I think that's where it's very interesting. And I want, because you mentioned the pedestal situation,
Yeah.
and I think linking it back to the leadership discussion, I think that's where there is a risk when, you know, as a leader or as someone leading people or managing people, and you're really good at it, but make sure that you always have your foot on the ground, because otherwise you have the risk that you kind of become, as you said, on a position where it's so difficult either to challenge you or to approach you. And it can be super interesting and vivifying, energizing to have that kind of intention. But it can also cause damage to people, because some people, they will be in a phase of their life where they are not able to have self-responsibility. It's very difficult for them just to, you know, wake up in the morning and go to work. That if you have kind of the guru, and I'm using really the guru with a quote here, which is really good at influencing, you really also have a responsibility to make sure that you don't influence life of people in a damaging way. So it's also very like self-responsibility from the individual receiving the information, but also the one giving the information. And I think for me, that's linking back to a bit of discussion about the doctor and the pedestal. It's allowing yourself, and I think for us, and I will say here, even as a woman, and I would say woman coming from certain type of circle, we have learned that if someone from with authority or are telling us something, it should be right.
Right.
We have not learned. We have not learned in that way to be critical, use our critical thinking at that level. I think it's changing, and I can really see with the younger generation that it's changing big time, and it's good. But on the same time, I think critical thinking also doesn't need to be extreme. It's always a question of balance. But I think that's very interesting to see how people are gonna, okay, I want to be a leader, but it comes with responsibility. Am I aware of those responsibilities? Do I realize what it means? In my case, it's my specific case. What does it mean to be a leader, and what are the pros and the cons of that? And and the pedestal situation is really, for me, a good example of things who could go wrong for someone, and the receiving hand as well.
For sure. And what you were saying about, you know, a female being in a leadership position, or because any one of us really can be a leader in their own position. And I think it very much comes down to the values that you hold. And, you know, there's also like mission statements that you can develop or that you have for yourself in place, like what's the highest goal that you want to achieve. So the small things around it like fall into place a lot more easily. But what I wanted to say is with the female in that position, because I used to work in hospitality, and I've like really worked my way up big time in that field, and it was very male dominated, and I myself wasn't taking care of my body at all. It was just like go, go, go. It was an awesome time in my life, but I'm just not, first of all, not driven enough anymore to do it. Then all the energetics, I just couldn't do it anyways. But it was just like part of my path at some stage. And it really taught me a lot about leadership and about how to bring about a good team, like to, and not say I'm not doing this work because I'm the leader, like I'm the boss of you, so you do it, I don't do it. What I found is that the people were really surprised when I was doing their work but part of it was also that I wanted to learn how they're doing it, so that I knew exactly what they were doing. It didn't mean I'm doing it all the time, because I'm, after all, I have a certain position, so I need to prioritize. I need to learn how to delegate too, so I don't micromanage or anything like that, because that can get you into trouble as well. But just to know and to see I'm there for you just as much, like we're part of a team, like all of us. And I think that like grew a lot of respect with people, and we had a very awesome team going. That was an amazing time. But again, coming a lot from the male perspective, so there was a lot of male operating within me, and now much more going into flow, which can then also be damaging to business in a way, I think, because you're no longer, because the world outside, I believe, is still very much expecting a certain thing from you, when really you're going a completely different route, maybe by choice, maybe not. And you can only do so much on that route, and to bring about that understanding, which I believe is also part of my own journey, to bring about that understanding, to take care of your body, to honor yourself, to love yourself. And this is quite the journey for me, because this wasn't an easy path at all to get to that point, and then to be there and to face the criticism for example, not performing, when what I'm supposed to do is not performing. It is just allowing the flow, and allowing, when it's time, it's time, when it's go time, it's go time, when it's rest time, it's rest time. But it's kind of difficult to implement that in the current society. And I know, of course, all of you guys that are watching are very, very understanding. And I know also from my Patreons and all the other people, you guys know this, and it doesn't seem to be a problem, which keeps surprising me. So thank you for all of your support.
No, but it's very interesting what you're saying. And I think because you were mentioning about the flow, and that you're working more into the flow, and that for a certain type of structure is not working. And I think it's totally fine, because certain structure needs to work in certain ways and others needs to work in other ways. And there are structures which can accept both, and it's totally fine. I think a lot of things are acceptable as long as you say it and explain it beforehand, so people knows the frame. And as long if they know about it and they say, okay, I'm fine with it, it's they're taking their responsibility. It's I think a lot of issue about allowing yourself to be more into the flow, or less structured in a way, which is not totally right neither. It's more it's okay. I think it's because a lot of the times expectations or miscommunication or those kind of things are happening because people again don't use the voice and don't just explain what's going on. A lot of things I have to laugh because when you say about the flow, one of my way of working, and I kind of knew it beforehand, but I really was made aware the last couple of years, is that I'm someone who my brain works really quickly. I get a lot of information from quickly, like said information, unsaid information. It means that my brain, I cannot reply always to someone directly to a question or to certain things that people are asking me. I have learned to tell people, you know what, I have all the information, give me 3 days and I come back with a proposal. Why? Is because within those 3 days, I know my brain is going to work by itself. And the third morning, I'm going to wake up and I'm able to write on everything I need to write on in 30 minutes. And most people, when I say and explain that, they are fine. But if I would not explain that, people would say, but why cannot you just answer the question? And I'm like, it's not that I don't want, it's just I know that by allowing me time, let's say rest or do something, work on something else, actually I'm going to deliver you my best work. So I think it's a matter of communicating.
Totally. And a matter of knowing yourself, because you do know this about yourself. And I'm guessing you didn't always know this about yourself, right?
No, and that's where I would be also as you were. I was, the hard working because I loved my team. I was surrounded with great managers and I just wanted to keep going. But what I didn't realize is actually I was overloading my brain and my body. And I was like actually doing more, like worsening my condition instead of improving my condition. And me doing that now, it's it worked perfectly. Of course, I also understand if there is an emergency, there is an emergency and it happens. That's not an issue. but I'm able not to manage those emergencies and have those peak in energy that I need to use instead of always be on the peak of my energy. So it's very different. And another thing you said, which I think was super interesting when you were working in the hospitality world, is that you said, when building my team or working with my team, I would check time to time what they were doing and how they were doing things and try to do it myself. And I think that's one of the biggest advice I can tell someone, is actually doing what you do. And actually that's kind of what I'm offering when I'm working with people, and that's what also in a way you are doing as well in your kind of work, line of work, is we sit together, we work through together with what is happening. And okay, saying, I know for me, I'm good at planning. What I've realized, people, not that many people love planning and organizing. Maybe that's changing with some of the series on Netflix, which gives ideas to people. But that's something I've realized. But most of the time, it's because people don't know how to do it. And if you sit and explain, it happens. And
Awesome.
they really appreciate the fact, as you did, that you are sitting. And I know from my own experience that I had managers, top managers, really good what they were doing, but they had never been in my position. They never climbed the ladder in that way. So they could not really truly understand what I was going through on a daily basis. And that's where sometimes the authority issue is popping up again.
Yeah.
So I think that's the two elements I wanted to add, because I think it was interesting to say that I agree with you. I would also work like that.
Yeah, plus, whoever's working with you really feels valued in the work that they do, because you actually put in the work to get to know them as a person. That's the other thing I would really recommend, getting to know who you're actually working with, because like you said, people are so different and they can be used in completely different capacities. If you want to use the word used, they can be, their skills can be used. Let me put it that way. Their skills can be used in their specific way, because then you also know, oh, I can use this person for that task because they're so good at it. Or what I would then use is to switch people out, because they used to have like a lot of fights over certain things, because it was like a restaurant manager position that I had, but I had 5 different places. So these were connected. 4 of these were connected. The other one was like an individual thing, but they would, bring food to one station, and there were things, and sometimes they would argue about this. And then I just had them switch position. I was like, okay, you work there for a day and you work there. And then you see how you go, like walking in the shoes of the other. That did a tremendous shift. And people were, of course, and this is another thing too, because coming in there and doing this, of course, it was uncomfortable for people, and I knew this, but I was also willing to stand in the fire of this until they had experienced it. And it was, oh, why do we have to do this? It was that sort of thing. So I wasn't making friends like right at the start, but I felt it was very important to clear some things up. And then it was interesting, because a lot of them then came back and was like, whoa, I didn't know that it was like that over there. And I didn't understand why you were making us do this, but now I do. So thank you. And this was really interesting. And sometimes also, I think this is part of a leadership position, that you have to do things. You do explain why, but it may take some time for people to actually understand why you do the things you do. And like you said, it's all about communication, I believe, like talking about it, explaining what you're doing, why you're doing it. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, but actually, when you explain that specific example, the word, actually, you were building, and I'm also building in a way. We are building empathy on experience, based on experience. And some things, until you went through it, you can intellectually understand it, but you cannot emotionally understand it, or you cannot change, you cannot have another perspective on the issue, because you didn't go through that situation. And that's totally fine. But indeed, by switching position, you allow people to realize, oh, I'm discovering a new world. Oh, that's interesting. And that's really fun. But of course, and I think the other element is, you said it was uncomfortable for people. Yeah, people, I mean, as human, we love to know where we are going. We don't like to not know, at least. And I know me personally, I'm even more in that direction than most people. So imagine me being alive is already a challenge in itself sometimes.
Oh, for
I,
sure.
I exaggerate, but people love to stay where they are because they know, even if it's not working correctly, they would say, but that's in a way, it's easy, they know it. And by forcing them to switch position, you're like, oh, that's not really comfortable. Why do I need to do that? I cannot complain anymore, or I need to learn something I didn't expect to learn.
Yeah.
And yeah, it takes energy and courage to do that as well. So I think good on you that you did that in your teams, and I think good on also
Lots
I
of
want
people, yeah.
on the people who are doing that. It takes
Yeah.
courage to
Yeah, for
switch
sure.
and realize, okay, maybe I was wrong in the past,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I didn't know. I don't want to say I was wrong, but as like realizing maybe I didn't know enough to be able to really understand the full picture.
Yeah, to broaden just the
Yeah,
view of what was when this is the plate and then you go over it. Of course, you're going to think differently about things. That's just the nature of things. But like you said, it is a matter of course, I can tell you this 10 times, but if I send you there, or if actually, if you're going through it like physically, it's like one time is enough. And there were no more arguments, literally. Like people actually had a lot more understanding for the other's position. There were a lot more because of course they were connected with the telephones and everything, like to call each other. And it was just a different matter because in one restaurant, for example, it just took ages for the delivery guy to go up there. It took like, I don't know, half an hour or 40 minutes. And so since they experienced the whole process themselves, because with them it was only 5 minutes, and hence there was sometimes a little delay in time, and then they would be like wah 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 the other team, and I'm just like no. And that's it was a very easy solution, that had an amazing impact. And also when someone was sick, of course, then they already knew what they would do there, so it was much easier to switch them around when it was necessary. Yeah.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, the team is still talking about the team, although that was such a long, long time ago. It was at least 15 years ago now, 10, 15 years. And these people are actually still in contact and are regularly meeting, although they're not, I think, like most of them aren't working there anymore. But this is like goes to show, like, when you actually have like such a strong team together, how long that will go, because they developed actual friendships there, and that was tremendous, really tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah. I
and
mean,
and so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
And so cool for me to watch, like, to have that experience, because of course you make the mistakes, right? And you're learning by mistakes as well. It wasn't all like, yeah, this was so awesome, but it was like a great experience to go through and to see how everything goes together. This is, by the way, why I took up coaching and training too, because I thought it was so interesting how humans are reacting when they're thrown together, especially when it's kind of all involuntarily, or when there's a new element coming in or a new person coming in. Like, how do you get them to come together and to accept it? I found that really, really fascinating, and still very much do. Like, this is amazing, and this is why the topic of leadership is so important to me and so striking. And I wish people knew a little bit more about it, because there isn't just one way. And if and not everybody wants to be a leader, that being said as well, and that's totally cool. Some just like to follow, like, we're born a certain way. And I just think, step more into your potential, dare to try new things. And yeah, that's that.
No, I agree. And I think it's really important that you say not everyone wants to be a leader. And I think we wanted to have that discussion because for us, that's terms which have been striking lately. But I think we can tell to people, you can be called a mom, you can be called a dad, you can be just a good office employee. But in a way, you will be a leader if you just are true to your potential and what you can do. As you said, you don't need to be like voicing your voice publicly and writing article and post. Just be your true self. That's all what matters. And as long as it makes you happy or fulfilled, honestly, what else can we ask? It's already a task in itself, a challenge in itself. So that's cool. What I think which is really interesting is maybe saying, like you said, dare to try new things, try to talk with people you will not always think about to talk with. And that's where you learn most of the things, and you get new perspective, and you get actually the most brilliant ideas because you're opening doors that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I very much agree.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. That was awesome. Thank you so much for your viewpoints, for sharing, and just for being here and for agreeing to do this.
You're more than welcome. So happy I could share my insights. I'm curious to also know what people will think about those insights. I'm curious to have some reactions. Let's see.
Yeah, on that note, if you want to drop something in the comments, what leadership is to you, or a leader in particular that has impacted you massively in your life and why that is, that would be very interesting and helpful, I believe, also for everyone. And with that, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Thank you, Marie-Amélie, for being here. And I know we'll see you again for the fellow seekers anyways. And for private conversations at that too. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you next time, I guess.
Thank you, Marthe. Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. Sorry. We'll attach all of her links, Instagram, her website, and also LinkedIn profile that you can find down there if you wish to work with Marie-Amélie and her business Spark It. I think you should definitely check out her website. I really support her work because I know where she's coming from. It's not just some knowledge that she acquired, but she really, really went through all the stages that are necessary to be where she's at. Very authentic and very insightful and very intuitive to work with as well. So I really recommend her.
Super. I'm taking all the compliments.
Do so, please. We're going to do a little dance as usual. Perfect. That's it. All right. Well, we'll see you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.
See you.